This is a stick bug, and you might be wondering why you can't see it. Now, the reason for that is because you need a spyglass. I'm thinking that the player would need to use a spyglass to even see this mob properly in the Pale Garden. Perhaps once the player is about 1 block's length away, the stick bug would become visible to the player. I think this would add a fun new use for the spyglass, as well as add this fun bug-catching element to the game. I'm thinking this mob could fit very well into the Pale Garden for a couple of reasons. Much like the creaking, a stick bug tries to blend in and appear as something else, both trying to be as still and wood-like as possible, only moving when the right moment arrives. A unique instinct and wooden element that both of these mobs have in common just makes this idea work. Now let's talk about the use for the stick bug. I'm thinking that once the player enters the Pale Garden, they would begin to hunt around in the pale trees for a stick bug companion by using the spyglass. This would only be made more fun and interesting as the creaking mobs try to interrupt you. Now, once the player finds a stick bug, you could tame it with a type of food that a stick bug might typically like. Now, this next idea is a stretch, but go with me for a second. Some of you might remember my termite headpiece concept, a wooden headpiece shaped and designed for the player after befriending a local termite colony. Basically, a termite sits on top of the headpiece to stop arrows from affecting the player. I wanted to reuse this idea because another bug-type mob such as a stick bug being placed on top seems fitting for my style, as I like to connect my ideas. The headpiece is also wooden, which makes me think that both the termite and stick bug would feel at home on top of it. So the first concept I have for this stick bug and player combo is simple. If a player remains still when seen by a mob, the stick bug will release a type of odor that causes a player to become less noticeable to mobs. So the more the player remains still, the more stealthy the player becomes, much like this stick bug. However, if a player moves around too much or pushes around a mob, the stealth effect would reduce until it completely depletes. So this could be an effect that the player could build up, which I like the idea of. It's also much like how the creaking works. Once the creaking is spotted, it tries to blend in and remain still. You may at times even unknowingly raise your stealth effect. So it could even become a passive reward as well. Perhaps different levels of stealth that the player reaches could cause different types of behavior from mobs. Now, my next concept is back in the Pale Garden. Once wearing the stick bug headpiece around the Pale Garden, the player must dispose of multiple creaking hearts. At some point, you'll see a creaking mob moving away from you. You must follow the one that is going somewhere. Where to, you might wonder. It's going to defend the one and only unique pale tree that holds something inside of it known as the creaking nervous system. Once you walk into the center of the tree, creaking nerves that hang from inside the tree will bond and attach to the stick bug and headpiece. More about that concept in a bit. But once the player is inside of the creaking nervous system, orange creaking nerves will hang in front of the player's face. I'm thinking that the player's view will then change to the view of one of the creaking's perspectives that is in the Pale Garden. Similar to this yellowish view of a tree, the player could then toggle between multiple creaking's perspectives and even control the creaking mobs. That might sound wild, but let me explain. Think about it. The creaking hearts control the creakings remotely, almost like some kind of organic connection. The Pale Garden is almost like an organic network of security guards that are being navigated by the forest nervous system itself. Then, once the player makes it to the nervous system, it's like some type of organic camera and security control center that the player could reprogram to become their very own ready-made guarded biome. Imagine how unique and different of a reward that would be compared to anything we've ever seen in the game. I also like the idea of one of the creaking's perspectives looking at a loot room or area nearby, but the player would have to find it. You will notice the creaking nerves that have bonded to the stick bug and headpiece. This will basically become your very own mobile creaking control unit. Once the player places a creaking heart in a nearby tree, the player's view will switch to a freshly generated creaking right near said tree. The player could then move around and survey areas that the player might want to look around in before going in themselves. So much like the way the creaking heart had the ability to control the creakings, the player is able to do so now by using the nerves on the wooden headpiece. Now the rules for moving around as a creaking would be somewhat similar to the stick bug rules. I'm thinking that the mobs wouldn't really bother you. However, the more mobs that see you moving around would reduce your stealth hearts. They could replenish, but if they all disappear, so will the creaking. Imagine the potential of how fun these ideas could be.